The battle to reopen is underway. Feeding your kids is not selfish. Who is protecting our nursing homes? Trump calls out the Lincoln losers, and Biden wants Trump to have intercourse with the world.
I'm viewing our great citizens of this country, to a certain extent and to a large extent, as warriors. They're warriors. We can't keep our country closed. We have to open our country. Somebody said, we could keep it for the next 18 months. We could keep it for the next 2 years. Doug Ducey's done an incredible job as the governor of Arizona. The people aren't going to accept it. They won't accept it, and they shouldn't accept it. We have a great country. We can't keep it closed. I mean, I've had doctors say, well, why don't we close it for a couple of years? This is the United States of America. I created, with a lot of other very talented people and the people of our country, the greatest economy in the history of the world, the greatest that we've ever had, the greatest employment numbers, the best numbers we've ever had, the best stock markets. I think we had 144 days of record stock markets. And then one day they said, we have to close our country. Well, now it's time to open it up. And you know what? The people of our country are warriors, and I'm looking at it. I'm not saying anything is perfect. And yes, will some people be affected? Yes. Will some people be affected badly? Yes. But we have to get our country open, and we have to get it open soon.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everyone. President Trump saying what needs to be said now. It is time to open up the country. And that is going to entail risk. And exactly as we had anticipated, exactly as we had thought would be the case, this is being immediately seized upon for political reasons. And people are claiming that the president doesn't care if there are casualties from this. We're returning now to square one. In the first few weeks of the recognition of the pandemic, right, when we finally understood what we were facing, and didn't understand it that well, but we knew it was going to be really bad. Many of us were saying, look, you got to take measures. Maybe there's a pause here, but shutdown is not the answer to this disease. You cannot shut down your economy. And for a 2-week vacation, so to speak, would have been one thing. But now we're going on 2 months, going to be in 3 months with some states. And you can tell that they think that the shutdown tactic worked, even though the data doesn't show that it worked at all. They can't prove that they can't prove that the shutdown had any correlation. There's about a 6 to 8 week growth plateau and then fall off period you see in all of the states that have adopted policies meant to mitigate the virus, irrespective of how quickly and how severely they tried to mitigate the virus. That's what I'm seeing so far. If I see different data, I'll let you know. But it also makes sense because you have a lockdown. We've gone to the most extreme that we can think of, really. I mean, short of doing what the Chinese government did and locking people, actually physically locking them in their homes to die, we've gone to extreme lengths. We've shut down our economy. We've cost ourselves trillions of dollars. And it's still spreading. The virus is still spreading, as I assumed that it would all along. And now the president's saying, look, we've just got to start living life again. We got to open up the economy. We got to start going back to work and doing things. And people are really acting like, no, we shouldn't do that. Not until we hit the benchmarks. The benchmarks are never going to be hit. If we wait for the benchmarks in New York State, or New York City specifically, we're going to be waiting for probably months. And at that point, what economy do we even think we'll be resurrecting? This test and trace procedure at every level, the government has shown you enormous failure here. The government's not good at handling pandemics. The government is not adept at this at all. Federal, state, local, nobody's had a handle on this. And what are we hearing from them when we start to say this? Be quiet. We're in charge. We have the power now. We have the authority. And the libs, and it's tough to separate how much of this is driven by their anti-Trump hatred versus how much of this is just their fear of returning to life. The libs are pushing for continued lockdown, and they must know that this is disastrous for the economy and that people are suffering, that cancer therapies are placed on hold, that people are not getting urgent and routine medical care, that there's all kinds of psychological, substance abuse, opioid overdose consequences to this, child abuse, spousal abuse. I mean, there's just the toll on our society of the lockdown. Remember, the virus is still spreading and we're still losing a lot of people. So it's not like we've locked ourselves indoors and, oh, we're all safe. No, we're still losing a ton of people. Lots of death out there. Now, as we understand, there are different risk factors and different individuals are more prone to the severe form of this disease. It's based on overall health and age. And as a percentage, your chances, if you don't fall into a high-risk category, your chances of dying from this are very, very small. But it's not like the lockdown has, they keep coming up with these numbers. Oh, it saved, we were going to have 2 million dead, and now we're only going to have 100,000 dead. They don't know if we were going to have 2 million dead. And we're going to have 100,000 dead even with the lockdown. What would we have had without the lockdown? They don't have any answers for this. And they're going to get increasingly authoritarian and also just more forceful with what they're dictating all the rest of us do as the data goes even more against their narrative. This is how governments work. This is how those who have power wield it when there's no check on their authority, really. They say, what do you mean you don't approve of what we're doing here? Now we're going to double down. We're going to do even more of it. This Texas Salon owner, Shelley Luther, who's gotten a lot of attention, I think she's speaking for millions and millions of people around the country when she was facing a judge. And remember, this is in Texas. This is not in New York. This is a state that you think of as a place that more, in its political system at least, more reveres the Constitution and has a greater degree of respect for freedom and autonomy and the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, you name it, right? You would think that's the case with Texas, but here's a judge in Texas who is sentencing Shelley Luther to 7 days in prison because she opened up her salon despite the statewide order about salons. So she's violating one of these orders that this is not legislation. This is just what the governor is saying. This is just what the apparatus of power has decided. And this is from the court proceeding. Here is what she said. Play clip 1.
Judge, I would like to say that I have much respect for this court and laws, and that I've never been in this position before, and it's not some place that I want to be. But I have to disagree with you, sir, when you say that I'm selfish, because feeding my kids is not selfish. I have hairstylists that are going hungry because they'd rather feed their kids. So, sir, if you think the law is more important than kids getting fed, then please go ahead with your decision, but I am not going to shut the salon.
7 days in jail, $7,000 fine. Because if you listen to the shrill idiots out there in the media, she's putting lives at risk. Here's a news flash for those in the lockdown forever camp. Life is now putting lives at risk. Doing anything other than hiding in your home is, you go out to buy groceries, you're putting lives at risk. You go for a walk to get some air, you're putting lives at risk. Everything now is a risk that they get to determine for you what's acceptable and what's not. Now, when I say everything's a risk, yes, it's the same way that I could tell you if it's going to rain wherever you are and there's thunder and lightning, there's a risk you could get struck by lightning. You could die. And you can't tell me there's no risk. You don't know that. So maybe you shouldn't be able to leave your house because you might get struck by lightning. Now, I'm illustrating a point. I know that COVID is much more widespread and dangerous than lightning strikes right now. However, the state shouldn't be in a position to be the arbiter of all personal risk for all individuals, because we are facing the eradication, I really mean this, the death of freedom in this country if this continues. You think, well, and I will be honest, I fell into this category too for a while. Look, we're coming together here as a country. It's an extreme example. They're not going to try to extend this out too long because they must recognize how dangerous the abuse of power here could be. And we were all under a lot of stress and we were scared. So we were hoping that our fellow Americans would respond to this terrible situation fairly, decently, rationally. And this is just getting worse. Notice how the demands from the left and the shrill, the hyena chorus out there, if you just want grandma to die, just yelling at people and acting like they're the only ones with any right to have an opinion. And they're so sanctimonious and self-righteous over this whole thing. Notice how we're further along here. We're 2 months into this, and they act like nothing has changed. They act like we haven't learned anything new about this. We haven't seen their policies play out. We have to just keep doing it. And they want to tell people like Texas Salon owner Shelley Luther, sorry, your kids are starving, but if you think you should be able to earn a living and feed them, you're putting grandma's life at risk. Now, this is also not true. This is a stupid phrase that you hear from people who are really intellectually weak. And there's a lot of cowardice out there right now from people who don't. And I don't mean cowardice in terms of taking risk. I mean cowardice in terms of accepting that people push for policies and ideas here that were bad, that were wrong, and they don't want to admit. They don't want to open the door to what have you guys done to this country? What are you doing to this country, libs? Oh, they were saving lives. They were saving lives. Turns out that while we've all been on lockdown, the virus is still spreading all over the country. You had Dr. Scott Gottlieb saying on CBS that we're catching 30,000 new cases a day, getting 30,000 new positives, which is probably 1 in 10 of the actual new cases on any given day. 300,000 new cases a day is what we are told now by an expert who's very plugged in with all this. We have 300,000 new cases. How long before we have this burn through America and we've all been exposed to it in some way? It's not going to be that long at that rate, folks. And we're on lockdown right now. I'm on the second month of this, being stuck in my home, only able to go out for the bare necessities and, for the situations that arise where you're wearing if you wear a mask and you go outside. This is absurd. Where are all the people that talk about freedom and the Constitution and America and all this stuff, all this Americana that we've for years, for decades, for our whole lives, been sharing with each other and discussing about how we're a country of free people, of free individuals. Right now, we're a country full of people who, unfortunately, when somebody in political power says, do this because I say so, it's not in the Constitution. There's no legislation to pass. There's no accountability for this whatsoever. You see, that's the problem with executives making laws and making determinations like this. Government executives, as opposed to at least a legislative branch, you might be able to vote people out, right? In this case, where's the check? Where's the authority? Oh, you have to wait until you can vote out the executive authority in charge here. And at that point, it'll be too late. There'll be so much damage done. I mean, you could hope that the House of Representatives provides a check on federal power. You could hope that a state legislature, if they have elections every, whatever it may be, depending on the state, every 2 years, every 4 years. But when you have one-party control in places like California, New York, it's bad news. But this is even beyond party now. Now we're seeing there is just a consensus that the lockdown is acceptable. And that, to me, is just disturbing beyond words, my friends. I don't know. I think I just woke up today, and I'm usually fired up to get into the fight, and I still am. But, man, it's discouraging to see some so-called conservatives who are just rolling over on this one, saying, yeah, if they want to lock Shelley Luther up for trying to feed her children, and this judge is going to lecture her and talk about how she doesn't have enough respect for the authorities. Whew. The authorities out there have shown us that there are a lot of them that don't deserve very much respect. There are people who are overreaching. There are people who are seizing too much power for themselves. And the experts have just covered themselves in dishonor in this whole situation. The people that are supposed to have the answers on all this, that we're supposed to listen to, they're just taking educated guesses. Their models are crap. Their theories are wrong. They don't want to be questioned. They don't want anyone to be able to say, hold on a second, what you said a week ago was wrong. Why should we believe you now? That's forbidden. Listen to them or else, peasant. That doesn't work out well in other societies. And I have a feeling this is going to get a whole lot worse here, too. I've got to tell you, the response to the virus and the fight over it is going to be what we're focusing on for the weeks ahead, because there are people that really think that we should be in this state of government total control. And they don't think that should be adjusted based upon the massive suffering of Americans right now across the country from unemployment, from empty bank accounts, from despair, and from a mass house arrest policy that, if you look at the numbers, it's not even justified. What are we doing? Let's finally push back. Let's stop the madness. Trump is right on this. He was right before, and they got him to bend the knee. We should have opened the country up weeks ago. People who are saying we shouldn't open the country up again until we hit the metrics. When's that going to be? September? What do they think the country's going to look like? These people are out of their minds.
It's astounding that he even introduces the question of red states and blue states. He's saying it out loud. He is politicizing a pandemic, not being patriotic, not talking about all Americans and how to bring us all back together. We're all connected. This is the largest city in the country. We help lead the national economy for everyone. We send a huge amount of money to Washington, much more than we get back.
Oh, that's right. Trump is the one politicizing this. We have a national media that's saying every day that Trump has blood on his hands. And we've been spending so much of our time fighting back against the false narratives about how we got to this point. What decisions were made? What could have been done differently? And we're told that Trump is the one politicizing this. Remember, they were lying about the early days of this. Trump missed this warning or missed that warning, and he just doesn't care, and he just wants his companies to do well abroad. I mean, the usual crazy stuff that you see. But I think you have to view, he mentioned New York and how this is the focus in a lot of ways of the discussion right now, my friends. I know most of you, a vast majority of you, aren't in New York like I am as I'm here talking to you. But New York is pushing policy for the rest of the country. This is where the elite news media is primarily headquartered. This is where the financial elite overwhelmingly are located, and there are many of the most powerful politicians in the Democratic Party are here. And what's happened in New York is being used as the justification for the expansion of these draconian lockdowns, and this has been the case for weeks all across the country. But there's also a lesson that I want you all to take from New York, and it's one that directly affects de Blasio, Cuomo. They got everything wrong in the early days, but even in the midst of the pandemic, they forgot to protect our nursing homes, and this has been a disaster.
And the question comes back to, how much is a human life worth? You see that projection model go from 25 to 200,000 cases from FEMA. You see the number of deaths go from 60,000 to 134,000. How much is a human life worth? That's the real discussion that no one is admitting openly or freely, but we should. To me, I say cost of a human life is priceless, period.
Thanks, Governor Cuomo. That's really insightful. Yes, we all recognize that human life is precious, although Democrats have a problem here because they think that a baby in the womb is not a precious human life if it inconveniences someone. So they've got we're going to not talk about that right now, but for Democrats to be lecturing everybody on the sanctity of human life is in and of itself. Democrat politicians to do so is absurd, especially someone like Cuomo, who's an abortion extremist. Even by his own party's standards from, say, 20 years ago, Cuomo is now an abortion extremist, as are all these other governors. But when he says that we're going to save every life, this is the kind of rhetoric that got people saying, okay, we're going to trust you guys. We're going to put our faith in the government. We're going to let you make these decisions for us, and we'll do exactly what you say. We'll stay locked in our homes. We'll watch our businesses evaporate. We'll destroy whatever savings we have. We'll hope that the government puts us back together financially and that protects us with the policies that are being enforced against all of us. And remember that there's no escape from this, right? I mean, this is the ultimate nullification of your freedom. It's not about whether you're allowed to take risks. It's about you can't put other people at risk. Well, what degree of risk? It's whatever they say. If I'm walking outside without a mask on, oh, man, I could be asymptomatic and I could breathe in the air, and theoretically somebody else could walk by and, get it in their nose or their eye, and, they're infected and now they could die. So I could be killing people just by walking around breathing. When the government says that you could be killing people by walking around breathing, there's nothing the government cannot justify. You need to remember that. And they're openly saying this to us right now. This is what Cuomo is saying. This is what others are saying. You might be taking lives. You're effectively guilty of involuntary manslaughter unless you listen to us. Let's test out this really frightening, very dishonest intellectually, but also a frightening theory from the government perspective. Yes, it's also possible that any number of things. I could walk into an elevator and somebody could be startled and have a heart attack. That doesn't make me a murderer. It doesn't mean I'm not going to walk into elevators. At some point, this has become too stupid and too absurd for us to sit back and just say, yeah, sure, whatever you guys want to tell us. But while they're playing the whole, while the Democrats are running around, they're the great defenders of life on this issue, telling a mother that she's not able to work a job with willing customers in a completely legal profession that she's been doing for a very long time in Texas with Miss Luther. She's not allowed to do that, and they'll lock her in a prison cell where, by the way, she could get COVID-19 and she could die. But the state will do that. They got to make an example of you. Got to make an example if you believe that you should have any basic freedom to pursue. That's right, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, right? There are some things we're forgetting here, folks. If you think the government can keep you safe, you're wrong. The government is always going to fail you. As I tell you on this show, day in and day out, it does not keep you safe and warm at night. It is not your friend, and it does not care about you. That's why we have a government based on restraint of government power. Why restrain government power if it's a good thing that there's more of it all the time? This is the basic philosophical separation between Democrats and Republicans, left and right, conservative and liberal. Why have any restraints if government is just going to do great things all the time? Oh, you mean government is full of incompetence and corruption and venality? Oh, and we know this. We know this from experience. And yet here we are. They say they want to save lives. Let me talk to you about what that effort to save lives looks like here in New York, where you have, as of yesterday, 1,700 additional dead in the nursing home system from COVID-19. 1,700. That's a big number to just say, oh, there's another 1,700 we didn't know about who have died in nursing homes. The nursing home system in New York is at about right now 5,000 deaths just in New York. It's as of yesterday, it was over 4,800. I'm sure by today, probably is at 4,900 or 5,000. So let's call it 5,000 or so. And they're adding to the number all the time from people who have already passed. This is the single group of people, those who are in assisted living facilities and nursing homes, who are at the greatest risk of mortality from this disease. And we have known that from the very beginning, really, of the pandemic. We've known that people in nursing homes, their age and comorbidities put them at in the highest risk categories, and they're in an enclosed place together with other people with similar, because it looks like it's easier to acquire this disease if you're older and perhaps have a weaker immune system. It's easier to acquire it than if you're younger and healthier. So not only do you get a worse form of the disease, you have less ability to fight off that initial infection. So we've known all along that the nursing homes were at very elevated risk. The report card, so to speak, that we can look at now for how the state has done when it comes to protecting our seniors in nursing homes in New York. And I'm telling you, this is going to play out in a lot of other states across the country. It already has in some, but you're seeing this is now spreading. I mean, the virus is going into places that over the last 7 days, between April 27th and May 4th, according to Axios here, you're seeing substantial increases in Nebraska, in Minnesota. You're seeing increases in Ohio, in Arizona, New Mexico, increased cases. Now, some of that's from testing, but there's also continued spread of the disease, right? So you will see this in more nursing homes. In New York, while they were lecturing us about how we all had to do our part, listen to them, and just stay locked indoors, get a bare minimum of sunlight, no fresh air, and a very high possibility of intrafamilial transmission if anybody was asymptomatic, which we know large numbers of people were, and spreading it to other family members, right? Just you're confining, you're adding to the viral load of the exposure that other family members have. You're adding to the duration of that exposure, and you're putting people in situations where their immune systems, I mean, our immune systems right now are in bad shape across the country. We're not being exposed to the outside pathogens that you want your system. We all know this. You want your system to be fighting against bacteria and viruses regularly. That's, I mean, if you're at a proper immune, homeostasis, if you're in the place you want to be, then your body's always dealing with these things. If you try to sequester yourself entirely from pathogens, your immune system is not as competent. It's just not as good. And that then brings me to what happened here in the nursing home system, because this is where the policy failures, while they're all lecturing us and saying, listen to us, we know what we're doing, and if you have a problem with this, we're going to lock you up. That's what this has turned into. Even though in the beginning they said don't wear masks, and then they said don't wear masks because we need them for doctors, which means, well, don't masks work for us then? And then it was, okay, maybe wear masks, and now it's everybody has to wear a mask. Now, look, I'm not making the mask thing out to be some huge deal. I'm not pretending that I can't go into a grocery store and put a face mask on if that lowers the transmission rate at all. As I said, private businesses, I'm reasonable. I mean, this is what gets so annoying when you're debating the other side, the lockdown, the lockdown forever chorus. I'm saying, look, we should take some measures here. We should do what we can to try to limit the spread of this, and particularly to protect the vulnerable from it. And they act like it's, we're just going to go back to normal life and you don't care about anything. Well, we knew that the most at-risk population, really the most at-risk places, were nursing homes. And we've utterly, in New York, the center of this virus, we've utterly failed to protect nursing homes and seniors completely. And this is a function of policy. Governor Cuomo told the nursing homes, I mean, this was a state order, that when someone comes out of a hospital for COVID-19 treatment, they can go back into the nurse. They must go back into the nursing home. The nursing home cannot turn them away. So if anyone came out of the hospital for COVID-19 treatment and was still able to transmit the disease, still had active infection, guess what? They were seeding the nursing homes with this disease. We've been talking now for weeks about how they could set up temperature checks and make sure that staff have very strict. Staff also were told that they could continue to work under circumstances that were clearly not sufficient to protect the health and well-being of the people in the nursing homes. I mean, this is what, if you really wanted to know how you could defend people, how you could help people in this situation, you would want to see, you'd want to show with the nursing homes that it's possible, and this is how it works, and this is what we're going to do. Instead, the state has been a complete and utter, it's been a debacle. Michael Goodwin wrote about it to the New York Post. He talks about this March 25th order that forced, quote, infected patients and allows for no exceptions and has not been changed, forces infected patients into nursing homes. And nursing home executives have no leeway here, no wiggle room on this. The paragraph, this is from a state order. Remember, they're taking all this power and they're saying it's to save lives. And then in New York State, they put an order forward like this. No resident shall be denied readmission or admission to the nursing home solely based on a confirmed or suspected diagnosis of COVID-19. Nursing homes are prohibited from requiring a hospitalized resident who is determined medically stable to be tested for COVID-19 prior to admission or readmission. My friends, how can anyone think that that's sane? You bring one person who is you bring one senior suspected of having COVID into that nursing home, and they're going into shared rooms and facilities, and it's going to spread everywhere, which is what's happened. That's why you have 5,000 dead seniors in New York right now. Even though nursing homes are contained environments, they've shut down visits. So people in the nursing homes haven't been able to see their families for almost 2 months now. And talk about suppressed immunity. So New York State, while Cuomo and his vain imbecile brother, who's breaking quarantine and then yelling people for saying that he should be quarantined when he should because he's actually infected. While Cuomo is lecturing the rest of us on how every life counts, he's making sure that people in nursing homes are shut in and alone and can't see their family and can't see their loved ones. And I can understand from an epidemiological standpoint why he'd make that decision. But you'd think that if you're going to shut people off from their families, you better be damn sure you're doing everything you have to make sure that nothing else is getting into those nursing homes that's going to kill these seniors. And instead, they're signing executive orders at the state level here. Cuomo is putting forward this order that was signing the death warrant for so many of them. I mean, the order reads, no resident shall be denied readmission or admission to a nursing home based on a confirmed or suspected diagnosis of COVID-19. My friends, these people are idiots. They're not going to save you. They're not going to protect us. They don't know what they're doing. And they're going to get more desperate as their ineptitude, as their complacency, their stupidity, it becomes just so painfully apparent. Then it's just going to be do what we say or else. That's when the state starts to bear its fangs. And I've got to tell you, and I'm as pro law enforcement as anybody you're going to find. But we got a lot of local law enforcement across the country that has not been showing its best side during this whole thing. And watching cops, abuse this power and go along with some of these orders is very disconcerting. And, it's a reminder, folks, tyranny is not just from the federal government.
The fact that we're letting people go to their jobs, they have to do it. If they held people any longer with the shutdowns, and you're going to lose people that way too, and you already have, I'm sure. But between drug abuse and, they say suicide, a lot of different things. There's no win, just so you know, there's no great win one way or the other.
This is the way that people who are being serious about complicated issues talk. All right. I know that Trump, the way he speaks, people all think it's, oh, haha, he's got his very unique speech patterns and everything. No, I mean understanding there are trade-offs. I mean understanding that there are no easy decisions, no perfect decisions, and that, yes, the president is finally looking the American people in the eye and saying, this virus is out there, it's not going away, and people are going to keep dying from it. So what are we going to do about it? Those who have been sitting around saying, oh, just listen to Fauci and Birx, and, we'll save so many more people and everything will be fine. If we just listen to them, they know what they're doing. They're wrong. They're wrong. They've been wrong all along. Flatten the curve so that we don't overwhelm hospitals. We didn't even come close to overwhelming our hospitals. As I've said to you, nothing should be viewed in absolutes. A 2-week lockdown to get hospitals ready and get gear in place and everything else, that still, I think, is justifiable under the circumstances and made sense. And that, 2 weeks is bad, but, businesses, a vast majority, even of small businesses, would have the 2 weeks of cash on hand. We could have pumped the money from the federal government to them after the fact, made them whole. We could have been okay but they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And a lot of this is based on the the lie that if we just wait long enough, we can wait out the virus. We can't. So what are we doing? You know, at some point, we have to just understand that there is a day of reckoning coming where the economy is going to start to open up, and there will be more cases of this, and most of them will be asymptomatic, and most of them will be very minor, even if there are symptoms. But this is going to be a public health challenge that endures for quite a while. That's where we are. And there is no easy way around it. There is no silver bullet. So what do? Putting in all these benchmarks and test and trace and testing and all this stuff. Nope. That's not gonna solve this. And the people who are pretending it will, very conveniently, want the power to tell you what to do all the time and in every aspect of your life.